Hey guys, it's Elphick here, MAEKAN sound engineer. As you might be aware, I took a trip to China in December 2017 with one of our good friends and photographers, Yin. We wanted to explore and understand a form of underground basketball culture called wild ball. It had grown quite a bit of traction in the past few years. Before I met up with Yin, I actually went ahead a few days earlier to meet with Erin. He's a professional basketball player from California, and he is one of my on-the-ground connection to wild ball. Now, as someone who grew up playing and watching basketball, I was really excited to meet him and try to understand just what kind of life was like for a wild baller playing, halfway across the world from his home with a different environment, culture, and sets of rules.
Well, I'm Erin. I'm a month and a week away from my 39th birthday. I played, basically 15 years, as a pro. Played around the world, played, high-level Division I ball at Providence College. Came out in 2001. Played in the D League when it, was first rolling. Played in the third year of the D League. Played down in, South America. Played in Europe. Asia, Australia, New Zealand area. So I've been, around the world as far as, basically following the dollar and the opportunities. And, got to a point where, age discrimination starts to come into play.
Now, if you type in wild ball on the internet, there's a chance you won't come up with very much. I found, there's only one trailer for a documentary that I don't think it ever got aired, and some random small blog posts here and there. So I hopped on a plane early Saturday morning and spent the next day traveling into China, going from cities to towns to little villages. The whole journey took me about, a whole day. If you're interested in hearing the whole journey, how me and Yin got to this little town called Zhensheng, and there's an archive, a story already out on MAEKAN, feel free to search it up.
I think it's actually called wild ball and translates to wild ball. As far as with the tournaments, just from what I've been able to see, it's been anything from being in big cities to being out in, small little farm communities. And, you play well, get your money, keep it moving. It's a job. So, you have your base pay, you may have bonus money, you may not, but, it is a job. Whoever hires you wants to win for bragging rights in that little town. And basically you kind of play for that period of time and then on to the next, tournament.
I actually found out later that a wild baller's job wasn't really just playing official tournaments. It could be an exhibition game purely just for shows. Turns out the weekend that I was there, the reason why all these basketball players were in this little town is because they were playing a festival. So I was actually curious how a professional basketball player from the States would wind up basically middle of nowhere in China just to play basketball.
Knowing that, in my heart, my skill, my ability is not done. Basically about a year ago, went ahead and found out about the tournaments in China. Started doing, some research. A close friend of mine, he had played in it. He had played, in the NBA for a little bit, bounced around as well, played CBA here in China.
That friend actually turned out to be the former Los Angeles Clippers' Keith Kloss. And as Erin explained, he played in the Chinese Basketball Association, or the CBA, after his NBA career.
So, at the end of October, started doing some research, and Keith gave me a couple contacts. A few of those people, kept kind of getting back and forth with me. And a friend of mine who's playing in the ABL, he was playing in Hong Kong, saw him pop up, and he got me in touch with with Lucas, who runs basically kind of everything, Song Dynasty and whatnot, has contacts. He's played in the wild ball stuff. So, started talking a little bit. Again, he wanted to know what my resume was. Didn't know if, I was just some slouch looking to come over.
Before talking about Lucas and the Song Dynasty, it's actually worth mentioning that this whole wild ball thing, has a little bit of mystery to it and a little bit of notoriety. Because before making this trip, right, I was under the impression that this whole wild ball thing is kind of as the name suggests, wild ball, where no boundary, no rules, that kind of version of basketball where they play in the backwoods of China with all kinds of shady characters, gambling, corruptions, and fights in every game. Plus, it didn't really help when we first saw the trailer of Wild Ball on the internet that, kind of reinforced our perception.
Like the Wild Wild West. A lot of guys don't even know who they playing with. They just come in and team up with guys. It's a wild war. That's how we do it. Making money doing garbage.
And obviously there's more to it than what I saw in the trailer and when I learned about Wild Ball on the internet. So I follow Erin along with his few games over the weekend. This means hours and hours of car rides into Chinese countrysides, going to different villages for different games.
Do they have longer 3-point lines over here?
I think it's FIBA.
No, it's FIBA, so it's about 9 inches shorter than NBA.
Yeah.
But playing in this, you never know. It could be like old school, high school, top of the key type deal. So, you never know what type of court you're going to play on, what surface, where you're going to be. Literally, you don't know until you show up.
So I was chatting to Erin a little bit more about Wild Ball during the first car ride into his first game. Usually it's about 2 hours into this little village. I found out, there's a little bit of truth to this reputation of being wild. Basketball is a really popular sport in China. It's kind of transformed into this very lucrative business with all kinds of people looking to profit from it, right? So both from the players and also the agency side.
With some of the agents who kind of do the deals for the tours and stuff like that, it is selling a dream, saying that, you're going to play CBA and you're going to be playing in front of these, teams and whatnot. But, a lot of guys don't realize it. It is a business to get into CBA. You got to have a resume, which CBA, for the most part, I'd say probably 88%, they're all ex-NBA players for the most part. So unless you've been in the league for a few seasons, you're not going to get a gig, to go ahead and play. There's ways to get in, but for the most part, that's primarily what they're looking for because that sells tickets. So I'm sure that there's a handful of guys that they're looking at it from that standpoint. Others, because a lot of guys who play, they lie about what kind of money they make.
Yeah.
So they might, tell somebody, hey, I'm making X amount of money per month. I'm doing this. When it's not true, but guys who, like I said, they don't have a resume. They've never played anywhere. They might not have even played any college ball in the States or anything like that. They just hop on a plane and, come on over. They get here. And then it's a matter of just trying to figure, something out. So, if you do have some height, you can play a little bit, then, they'll go ahead and, put you out there.
Yeah.
Just like any other lucrative industry, there's always going to be the dark side, but there's the legitimate side too. So in Erin's case, he's playing for this organization called the Song Dynasty, which focuses on managing foreign players only.
So as far as with our place, so the premise behind Song is to have basically kind of a professional team, professional club type setting that wants to be the kind of the best wild ball team. At the same time, there's only a handful of tournaments where you can have basically unlimited Americans being allowed to play. So that does make it, a bit of a challenge.
Yeah. Is it mostly American?
Yeah, as far as with our situation, it's all American.
Right.
For the most part. I mean, before we had a Jamaican, but he grew up in the States.
Basically like forward. Right?
Yeah. So that's our situation.
Although the league has a very large pool of talented players from South America, Europe, Africa, Japan, and the Philippines, part of what makes wild ball such like a dynamic sport is, these rules in each games vary a lot between tournaments. And some of these special rules or house rules, as they say, can really favor the local players.
It's just rules for the different tournaments. Not everything is the same. So depending on where you're playing at, it can be, for example, 2 foreign players on a team, but they can only play a total of 3 quarters between the 2 of them. Doesn't matter how you decide to play, it's only 3 quarters. So you have things like that. You have tournaments where you may have to have one local player, and the local player means somebody who's from that town, who has to be on the court at all times. So I mean, every kind of tournament place you play at, there can be different rules. And that's where whoever kind of your liaison is, in this case, it's Sarah, being able to provide the rules. This is what we're playing with, this is what we're able to do.
With all these different rules and regulations and different games and different countrysides, and especially being in a country where you don't speak the language, you would think that this would be very discouraging, even for the pros. But then for Erin, this is the industry that he was bred for.
I mean, it's a business, and where you fit in, and does it work? Yeah, I mean, it's honestly, I mean, hoops is like any other job. It always comes down to, it's not necessarily performance. It's a business, so it can be nothing more than just a favor for a favor, based off of who you know.
Right.
Or you go ahead and you ruffle the wrong feathers, that'll cost you your job. So,
And he is right. It is a very competitive industry, and not just from the athletic side.
As far as being a professional, you always want to put your best foot forward, because it's basically open auditions, every time you play. So the better you play, the more people want you, the more money you can make.
At this point, I was very curious, how do they stay on top of their game if every single game is with different teammates, different environment, and playing with different stakes?
I mean, I've never really had any type of ego clashing or anything like that. I think I've been pretty fortunate with who I've been able to play with. At the same time, you figure out who's about their money. So I don't think the ego in the sense is about who's scoring more or anything like that. I think the ego is more about, you need to get your act together, because now you're messing with my money. Your antics are messing with what I'm looking to make.
As we're driving through the countryside, sometimes I look out the window and, seeing past these small farming houses, and some of these still run on coal. I was very interested in the idea, how do these players stay motivated, leaving their home far, far behind? Some of them come from America, all around the world. And some of these games, when you win, most of the money go to the owner, the tournament owner. So I asked Erin, what are the motivations for players usually?
Well, I mean, you want to win a championship, and at the same time, you want to pad your pockets. You don't want to be in a big league, playing for free. So I mean, there's always, motivation. But I mean, if the money's good and stuff like that, it's no longer about the money. It's about, winning, the championship. Winning those, bragging rights, for the year.
The more I talked to Erin, the more I found out he has a very strong work ethics. In his late 30s, he's still hustling in the CBA. During off seasons, he would play in the wild ball tournaments. Back in a hotel, we got to a point where he revealed his personal health conditions that require a lot of self-discipline and maintenance that made him who he is today.
4 years ago, I got struck with Crohn's disease, had a couple massive surgeries. It took me a year and a half to figure out what was going on, medication, go through all the different testing. So as much as I wanted to play, because I was still working out and doing things, I just couldn't leave because I had to figure out what was going on. You got to have your health in order to work. So through that, spent a lot of money, hit rock bottom in terms of not having a job. Relationships had crashed and burned just through that whole, situation. So for me, it's, during that time, it's been just, not having, anything positive go on. So it just been starting from scratch and just having to work, the way back up. Like we were talking about earlier, eating at Deco's, I know that it's rice, grilled chicken, vegetables. And one of the things that I've realized as getting older and, just always being, involved with fitness, it's not about how things taste. It's about, am I getting what I need to be able to do my job and to get through the day? Of course, we like things that taste good, but if it's something that's basic and you can go ahead and get it and it's going to keep you fueled and energized, then that's what it is. So I can, when people ask you the question, what can you eat for 5 days straight, 3 times a day? I do that a lot here in China. Eat the same meal over and over and over. Yeah, you get tired of it with certain things, but you know what? At the end of the day, I'm looking at, I can do my job.
Erin took a very strong stance for himself, that he needs to get back on his feet with strong beliefs and self-discipline. Seeing him on court, far, far away from his home, seeing how he interact with the locals, where, everyone's curious about him, but at the same time, in a very genuine and lovable way. Here's some of the snippets of first few moments when we got to the court for the very first time.
Get the pregame. 谢谢。
Thank you. Thank you. 给我个水果。
你好。你好。你好。
It was a very eye-opening experience for me too, seeing how the Chinese locals interact with, a black basketball player, fascinated by their outlook. All they do is want to take photos, touch their hair. It's a pretty interesting timing for myself as well, because I was in Chengdu 2 months ago before I went to Yunnan to do this basketball story. I got to talk to another producer friend who's named by Harikiri, who is also black and living in China, doing hip hop music. And we got to talk a little bit about cultural appropriation, and it's just interesting to see how the race issue in China is they don't have prejudice. They're just genuinely being very curious. So I asked Erin a little bit more how he felt about Chinese people perceiving black people in China.
Yeah, I was talking to my friend in Chengdu, they said you know, these Chinese people would just like go up to him and like feel his hair.
Yeah.
And they would say like, hey, it feels like cotton. Honestly, like you wouldn't get away if you're in the States. You know, if a white person says
Right,
that
right.
to you,
Exactly.
It's like a very different context.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you know, people are going off of textures and feelings of what they know. So, you know, other people might say, oh, you know, your hair is, you know, kind of coarse, almost like a Brillo pad in a sense. But it's never looked at as far as with any type of, you know, racism or anything like that. Like I've never encountered that as long as I've played. And then at the same time, you know, it's great with sports too, because guys can go ahead and chop it up like we're doing right now. And we can go ahead and laugh and joke about the different stereotypes. Or it might be, yo, I was out, you know, in this situation right here, and this guy went ahead and called me this, and this. I'm looking at him, and, you know, he said it straight face because that's what he heard, and that's what he thinks is acceptable to say. And it's just like, wow, he went ahead and said that. And then all of a sudden you see that he's been educated, and then he's like, ooh, you know, I've said something wrong. And then next thing you know, they're apologizing. So it's things where sports can, you know, bring people together.
During that week of following Erin around, me and Yin got to see how he interact and worked with the international players and local players from the team. Just really show his dedication and passion for basketball. He's living the dream and really worked hard for it. That reminded me when I was a little kid, fell in love with basketball, and the only thing in my mind were just practicing shooting and trying to dunk. But anyway, I was very motivated and inspired by him after the conversation. And so I asked him if he had any final words for the people that want to work their dreams and passion into their career.
Like with anything, you just got to commit. Yeah. Like you got to commit 100%. I mean, you know, I remember the 8th grade. I was like 13 years old. And my parents were driving basically about 400-ish miles. It's about 300, 400 miles between 2 tournaments out in the middle of nowhere from Palm Springs, out in the middle of the desert in the Mojave. And then I had another tournament going on out at the beach, out in Fullerton. So my parents were driving me back and forth. It wasn't an issue. You know, they slept in the back of our pickup truck, had a little camper shell on it. You know, so they slept in the back of that. You know, I was sleeping on the floors, you know, in gyms, you know, playing. You know, and my old man, and I'll never forget it. You know, he said, you know, your mom and I, we have no problem driving you all over the place. Just don't bullshit us. You know, even if you have an off game, you know, you play hard, but don't bullshit us. And that's stuck with me ever since. Like I said, you know, from 13, 14 years old, that's always been, you know, my motto. So whatever it is that I get myself into, that's the voice that I always hear.
Yeah.
You know, don't bullshit me.
Got the rainy day game going on, wet court. That's what it's about. Trying to get this money. Wet court, dangerous today. I expect nothing less. This is what it is. Got my man Elf. He's doing some filming. We got some things coming soon. But yes, this is Wild Ball at the wildest and craziest.